The mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have 2 academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it and do it.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another edition of FSU Coach Live. My name's Tim Baghurst, and joining me for this session is Tessa Taylor. She is a cross-country coach, a track and field coach, somebody who's doing it all. Tessa, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of background of how you got into this role.
So my coaching journey actually started many years ago. I ran at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and I was an art major in college. When I graduated, I had a summer job working at a camp as an art director and no plans after that. So about halfway through the summer, the assistant coach at Furman called me and said, "Tessa, I've taken a job somewhere else. I think you'd be good for this. Are you interested in coaching?" And I thought, "Oh, sure. I don't know what I'm doing and I need a job." So that's how I started coaching. So I was an assistant coach at Furman for 2 years, and track and field, cross country at the collegiate level is year round. I mean, you're doing summer training, recruiting, cross country, indoor track, outdoor track, and it wasn't really conducive to family life for me at that time. So I ended up taking a break from coaching for a couple of years, but always thought in the back of my mind that I wanted to get back into it. So fast forward to 2021, my family moved to Frostproof, Florida. And at that point, all my kids were older and in school, and I knew that I was going to have time to do coaching again if the opportunity arose. At the time, there was a coach already at the local school, but then a couple months later, I got a call from the athletic director saying, "Hey, Tessa, the cross-country coach has retired, and we know you like to run. Why don't you apply for the job?" So that's how I got back into coaching. So I feel like in some ways, I don't get a lot of credit for it, that it was providential that my paths led this way, but so here I am.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear different stories and how people got into coaching, but a lot of times it almost falls into your lap from having been an athlete. And it sounds like that was the case for you. What did you do once you became an assistant coach at Furman to almost solidify your legitimacy as an assistant coach? Because otherwise, as your athletic director said, "Oh, you were an athlete. You must be a good coach, or you must be able to coach. Go for it."
So really, when I was at Furman, I didn't do anything to to credit myself as a coach. It was just the head coach and me at the time. It was a fairly small program that was over both the men's and women's program. So I got to time workouts. I didn't actually ride any of them, and I got to drive a lot of 15-passenger vans. So looking back, there are things that I could have done. I could have pursued different sort of coaching certifications through USA Track and Field, but none of that was really on my radar, and it wasn't something I talked with the head coach about. So I really did not have any qualifications to be coaching at the time. Just my experience as an athlete.
And now looking back on that, you recognize maybe that's not a great thing, but we see it a lot, right? It's pretty common. How do we, I may be asking a big question here, but how do we change that? How do we get Tessa, who was a college athlete, who's now an assistant coach, where it becomes an expectation? Hey, we're hiring you. As part of that, you're expected to now get trained in this.
Yeah, I think part of it is it needs to come from probably the athletic department and from the head coaches to encourage that for their assistant coaches. And I think coaching education has there's more opportunities now maybe than there were back then. Like I could have gotten certified through USA Track and Field, but I actually didn't even know that was an option. I just assumed coaches were coaches because of experience, not because of any sort of formal education. So I was naive about it. I didn't know. And it could also be that a lot of coaches, like head coaches and maybe administration 20 years ago, didn't know about all the opportunities as well. But I think it starts with having the support from the top saying like, hey, we want you to grow and learn as a coach. And we think this is important. So we're going to give you the time to do it, because coaching takes up a lot of time. So many young assistant coaches probably think like, I don't have time to go take a class. So you need support from your coaches and administration to have the time and resources, because a lot of assistant coaches aren't making a lot of money to be able to pay to take a class.
Yeah, that's well said. Have you seen that? Have you seen that change now that you're in the school system, or is this something that maybe is systemic to coaching?
Oh, I think it's systemic to coaching. I think the reason that it's different, a little bit different now in the school system, is there are certain requirements that you have to meet to be a coach. But for example, I'm not a teacher in the school system. So for me to become a coach in Florida, I first had to get a 3-year emergency certification, which meant they did a background check and did all that sort of stuff. But there were no coaching like classes. Then after 3 years, just this past summer, I took the 5-year certificate, which actually involved taking classes that have to do with coach education. One of them was first aid and coaching, one was sports specific, and the other one was an overview of like philosophy of coaching. But I coached for 3 years without those. And so other than going out on my own and getting my education through the FSU coach program, I only had to pretty much have a background check and get trained in CPR, first aid, that kind of stuff. So there was no coaching specific training that I had to go through to be a coach in Florida.
Yeah. If by the way you're watching, you have a question for Tessa, just put it in your chat box, comment section, wherever you're watching from. We'll try to get it to her. I'm not going to go down the route of let's discuss coach education in Florida, because that is something that I'm very passionate about. I know you are too, but it's a long discussion, and
Yes.
and I don't want to go there today. What I do want to look at a little bit is you decided to do our program. You have a master's now in coaching. Why did you do that? Because as you admitted, you don't need it. You could certainly go and get some lesser certifications, some more affordable certifications. Why do a master's in coaching? What was the motivation?
Yeah. So for me, it was twofold. The way I first found out about it was our county athletic director sent an email out to all the schools in the county saying that there was a scholarship available for students, for coaches to be students at the FSU coach program in Polk County that would pay for about half of it. So that really sparked my interest, because as a paid community coach, not raking in a lot of money, and the thought of getting a master's, I always thought would be really expensive. But then when I saw that there was a scholarship available that could cover half of it, I was like, oh, I need to look into this. So that was what first got me interested in the FSU coach program specifically. But my first year coaching, I realized that I knew a lot about running. I knew a lot about being an athlete, and I had an idea of how to coach athletes, maybe with the same mindset that I have. But I realized that I needed help in coaching the full range of athletes that I have. We are a middle school, high school combined. So all of our athletes compete in high school sports. So that means I have 6th graders on my team and I have seniors on my team with a wide range of abilities. I have kids that running is their passion, it's their favorite sport, but that's really just a handful. Most of my team is made up of kids that their favorite sport may be soccer or swimming or tennis or something else. And they're coming out in the fall to run cross country to stay in shape for that. And then when you get to track in the spring, we have a lot of football players and basketball players, and track is also their second sport. So I realized that I was not well equipped to emotionally coach athletes of all these different levels and ranges, and that I needed guidance. So before I found out about the FSU coach program, I was reading books, I was listening to podcasts, I was doing everything I could to try to learn more, because being an athlete and coaching are different.
No question. Can I ask maybe what are 2 or 3 things that you've taken away from the master's program?
So one of the things that has really applied to many situations that I've been in is just developing my core values as a coach. In one of the first classes I took, we went through this whole process of developing our core values and our purpose and all these things. And that has really helped me in many situations that I've been in. It helps me to stay true to myself. So I'm not trying to be somebody else, but it also helps me to make decisions that are in line with my core values. So at the end of the day, even if I have to make a hard decision, have a hard conversation with somebody, if it's in line with my purpose and my values, it's a lot easier to go to sleep at night, and I can feel good about what I've done. Also, I'm able to communicate those with my parents and my athletes at the beginning of the season and throughout, so people know what to expect. And it's not a surprise when coach has to make this decision halfway through the season and everybody's wondering what coach is going to decide, that if I'm in line with the values that I've set forth at the beginning, everything goes a lot more smooth.
You talked about having to coach different age groups, different skill levels, ability levels, and also athletes who are in different sports where cross country, track and field may not be a priority. How do you particularly work with other coaches where you may have a basketball player, you may have a football player who that's their primary sport, but they're coming to you for a secondary sport, but you need them in the state championship or you need them in regionals. How do you navigate or juggle working with those coaches? Because I imagine most coaches would probably say, well, my sport is more important than your sport.
Yeah.
I need this athlete more than you do. How do you handle that when you're trying to be successful?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I'm still working on it. I don't have all the answers, but I feel like each year I learn from mistakes from the year before, to try to get a little bit better at it. I will say the first year that I was kind of surprised by it. So I didn't do any planning. It was more like when something would come up, I'd be like, oh, you have a volleyball game. Okay, like let's try to figure this out. So the first year I was not prepared at all because our school's fairly small. So it's very common for athletes to be playing multiple sports. So then what I started doing was like, okay, I need to find out who the coach is and talk to the coach ahead of time and try to plan like, okay, we both have practices at the same time. On these days, let's have them come to cross country first. On these days, let's have them go to volleyball or football first. So trying to set that up with the coaches has been helpful. Some coaches are more willing to do that than others. And when coaches are willing to like have that conversation, it is helpful. Some coaches prefer to leave it up to the athlete and say like, we don't need to have a plan. Let the athlete choose where they want to go. But the problem with that is then the athlete feels like both the cross country coach and the coach of sport X expect me to be at practice. So then the athlete feels torn, like they're doing the wrong thing no matter what they do. Like, well, if I go to cross country, then the coach for the other sport's upset. If I go to this, the cross country coach is upset. So I found it's better if I can get a coach to work with me and even planning like a practice schedule so that the athlete knows where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be doing and doesn't add extra stress.
Sounds like a lot of work for you.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And I do have another part-time job that I do from home. I've been working for Outreach North America since 2008, and it's a nonprofit ministry group that helps start new churches. All this is to say that job is only 10 hours a week. My husband also works full time, so I do have the flexibility to spend more time on coaching than probably even the traditional school teacher does, because they're in the classroom all day and then they're coaching all afternoon and then often competitions on the weekend. I usually have some time during the day that I can devote to emailing, organizing, and doing this kind of thing that most high school coaches do not have.
Coaching in schools is often, I think it's fair to say, poorly paid. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing you don't do this for the fat check that comes each month for your efforts.
No.
What is your why? Why do you do this? You don't have to. You could probably go get a Walmart job that pays better. What is your motivation for doing this?
Yeah. So I honestly feel like I'm called to do this right now. My family moved to Frostproof. My husband's a local pastor in town. Back during June of 2020, in the middle of COVID, we came from the upstate of South Carolina. Our family, we are mountain people. We didn't live in the mountains, but we were an hour away. If we wanted to go hiking, go to the mountains, like that's where our heart was. But back in 2020, this church in Frostproof started calling my husband and wanted him to apply to be their pastor. And we were both sort of like, well, it's in Florida. It's in the middle of Florida. It's hot. It's flat. We like mountains. So at first we kind of ignored them, but they kept calling. And then finally, I actually looked at my husband. I said, Garrison, I said, why don't we at least go down and visit? So that way we gave them a fair chance and we could tell them no in person. So we came down to Florida and visited, and really both of us really felt like a burden for this community, and not like a burden, like a heavy burden, but just like felt drawn here. And at the end of the day, we're like, why can't we go to Florida? Like, it's because we like mountains and because it's hot didn't seem like a good enough reason when everything else seemed lining up with our gifts that this would be a good place for us. So that's how we ended up in Frostproof. And I didn't start coaching for a year later. So I didn't even know that part of us coming here was going to end up being me coaching. But even before I took the job, I found myself like going out and watching the local cross country races and feeling drawn to the cross country team, even before I knew anyone. And so when I ended up working out, I really felt like it was my calling to serve in this way. So that's the spiritual side of things. But also my why for coaching is just wanting to help develop these young kids. I tell them at the beginning of the season that my goals for them is I want them to learn to enjoy running. I want them to experience self-improvement, and I want them to be healthy. And I think that's something that every one of my athletes can do, whether they're the first person on the team or the slowest person on the team. So it's really about developing kids. And so that's a lot of my why. I coach both boys and girls, but I've also read a lot and also seen firsthand how when girls get into middle school, they drop out of sports at a rate a lot faster than boys. I have twice as many boys on my team as girls, and most of the girls on my team are middle schoolers. As the older they get, they a lot of times stop playing sports. And so I also have a passion for wanting to encourage girls to stay active and healthy, even through puberty, which for girls is a lot of times not as linear as boys. When boys hit puberty, they get the testosterone, and especially in running, they just usually get stronger and faster. For girls, it's a lot more up and down. And if they can ride that out, usually they come out stronger on the other end, but a lot of girls quit before then. So those are a lot of the things I have going on inside as my internal motivation in coaching these kids, and not for the paycheck.
One of the things you didn't mention is winning, and you can't tell me that you're not competitive.
This is true. So I try not to focus on winning, because I find that if kids are improving and self-motivated and doing well, that winning actually becomes like one of the byproducts of it. But I try not to make that our focus. So my first year coaching, we made it to the region cross country meet, but we did not make it to state. The second year, our boys team made it to state, and then they made it last year as well. This year, we still don't know. And that's a really exciting thing. We really celebrate making it to state and winning, but it's not the main focus. And one of the things I tell my athletes when they're in a race is, I don't want you to just focus on time, especially during cross country. Every course is different. It's a little bit different than track. During track, I mean, all tracks are the same. They're same oval, but cross country, some courses are hilly, some are hard, some are flat, and you can't always compare times. So I try to encourage them, like, yeah, pace and time is important, but what I want you guys to focus on when you're out there on the course is actually passing people. And when you pass people, then you'll end up getting a fast time because you're competing. So we have these kind of conversations. And one of the kids on the team said, "Oh, coach, I finally get it. If I actually focus on passing people instead of looking at my watch the whole time, I run faster." I was like, yes. So we do care about winning, but it's more about the journey to get there. And another thing about both track and cross country is most of these races that we compete in have multiple schools. So it's not like we're just going head to head against Avon Park in the town next door. I mean, we could be at a big invitational meet where we're competing against 20 to 30 schools, and actually win the whole thing is very rare. My first year coaching, I think our record was 0 to something, because you only get a win if you beat every single school in the meet. And I was thinking, well, we beat 5 schools in this meet and we beat 2 schools in this meet, but none of that actually counts for your record. So I don't want my athletes to be defeated by seeing a record like that. I want them to see the little goals that they can accomplish on the way to achieving great things, whether it's making it to the state cross country meet or running their best time. I mean, I had one athlete who ran a whole race this past Saturday without walking for the first time. So, I mean, got a wide range of abilities, and I try to celebrate and encourage all the little wins.
Yeah, I can see the title of your biography, The Losing Coach, right?
Thanks.
Yeah, well, it's what I mean by that is it's got to be frustrating knowing that you're seeing improvement, and yet you're still judged by a record that is almost impossible to achieve.
Yeah.
And so if an athletic director comes in and looks at Tessa Taylor's record, wow, they didn't win anything last year. Yeah. But the truth is, as you're alluding to, you're showing improvement. You are beating other teams, but nobody cares about that, because all we look at are the data in the chart that shows that you haven't won any meets. That's got to be frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe because my livelihood is not tied up in this job, this also helps me maybe be more free than if I was a head college coach and my family was depending on it. But being at a small school, I'm not too worried about getting fired for having a losing record, especially in the sports that I coach. Maybe if I was a football coach, people would pay more attention to the record. But one of the things I also think about, especially in the sport of running, there are schools that in the state that they win state every year. They have great teams, but I also look at what kind of training they're doing. And a lot of these high schools are training in the way that a college program would train, and that they're running high mileage and doing a lot of things that I honestly don't want my athletes doing yet. I like to leave room for them to grow. So whether they go on to running, if they go on to run in college, I can tell the college coach when I have the conversation, I'm like, hey, this kid's running this time, which is pretty good, but they're doing this off of only running 25 to 30 miles a week. When they get in your program and they go to the next level, they still have a lot of room to grow. Whereas some kid who's coming from a program that's winning state every year, already running 70 miles a week, they're not going to have as much room to grow. So that's something that I like to do too, is keep things on level for where they are, which means that Frostproof may never win a state championship, but I'm okay with that because I want my athletes to stay healthy. I don't want them getting stress fractures while they're in high school. I don't want them having to worry about having energy deficiency and all the things that you really have to stay on top of when you start ramping up the training at the collegiate level.
That's a really good point. Coaching has its challenges, and I'm curious what kind of challenges you've experienced, you've had to deal with in this environment of being a head coach, of working in a school system, of navigating other coaches, working with an AD. What things do others who may be interested in going into coaching or maybe already coaching need to understand? Hey, that's not just me. Other people are experiencing this too.
I think one of the things that was actually the biggest surprise for me when I started coaching in the public school system was that I was going to have to be a fundraiser. That was something I wasn't anticipating. I knew that there were booster clubs and fundraising that went on, and I always thought it was for extra stuff. Like if you wanted to have fancy warm-ups and things like that, you had to raise money for them. But we really have to raise money to even help pay for school buses to take us to races. I'm not a teacher, but the other coach is a teacher. And if we miss a day of school for a race, the athletic budget has to pay for the sub. So there's just all these sort of things that we fundraise for that I just assumed school districts had the money for that we don't. So fundraising can be a challenge and it can be frustrating sometimes. But I think if you're not already coaching, you're thinking about going into it, knowing that if you're coaching in the public school system, fundraising is going to be a big part of your job. I think that's something that caught me by surprise. I'm getting into a better groove now of like knowing like, okay, I need to apply for this grant every year. I need to ask these businesses. And we have a good system now, I feel like, for our fundraising, but that can be a challenge.
Are there any maybe ideas that you found successful that other people could jump on? How do you actually raise money? What have you found that has been successful?
So there are some grants that I do. One of them gives us money for actually bus travel, and it's a local one through the Florida's Natural Growers Foundation, and it's for towns in the citrus industry. Then I found another one where I get shoes donated for my athletes. There's an online running shoe store where when people test their shoes, if they don't want them, they send them back and they can't resell them. And then this company donates shoes. I am at a Title I school, which means we're in an area with a high percentage of poverty. So some of these grants and donations I'm getting are because we are Title I. So those are some of the big things. Then I've also found with local businesses, what I'll do is have banners printed. So if they donate $300, they'll get a big banner that we hang out at the track. If they donate $200, they'll get a little banner. So that's something that we do that is usually pretty successful, because even a small local business usually has $200 or $300 that they're willing to give to have their banner put out in a visible place. And then as far as the students go, our experience has been that some students are better at fundraising than others, but we want everybody to try. So we've come up with this system. It's a calendar with 31 days, and we give the kid a printed paper with this calendar, and we say, try to get somebody to donate money for each day on the calendar. So day 1, you try to get somebody to donate $1. Day 7, you try to get somebody to donate $7. And so all the way up to 31. And that's one of those things, if a kid actually fills up the whole calendar, it ends up being over $400. But we found most kids, even if they don't live in a neighborhood with like a lot of people that are giving money and stuff, most kids can usually fill up at least the first week of like $1 to $7, and that's accessible because we don't want to burden families, but we want everyone to have some buy-in and try.
That's a great idea. Just to summarize then, any advice you have for other coaches, just you've learned along the way, whether it be in college or now in schools?
So I would say my biggest advice would be to figure out what your purpose, your core values are as a coach, and then remind yourself of them. And this is actually advice that I've gotten from you, that because when at the end of the day, you're the one that has to go to bed and sleep with yourself at night and what you've decided and what you're doing. So that's something that I've really tried to dial in on when I have to make tough decisions or have hard conversations, like, what is my purpose? Why am I doing this? What are my core values? And that has really helped give me peace of mind and confidence in making decisions as a coach.
Great advice. If somebody wants to reach out to you, whether it be watching the podcast or watching this, what's the best way for them to reach you with questions they might have?
They're welcome to email me. My email is tessa.taylor@gmail.com. So I'd love to hear from you.
And for those listening to the podcast, Tessa, TESSA.TAYLOR@gmail.com. Well, Tessa, thank you so much for joining me and sharing a little bit about your experiences. I hope those watching or listening find something useful in it. I know I did. And just a reminder, everybody, every couple of weeks, we try to do these during the semester. So be sure to subscribe or like or follow or wherever you're watching or listening. But on behalf of Tessa and myself, Tim Baggers, thanks so much for watching.